you typically do with with crime stats and stats in general. I'll go over some slides here in a little bit, but Mayor Keller is going to kick things off with a few remarks about overall crime trends and where we've been. Thanks, Mayor.
Thanks.
All right. Well, good afternoon, and we just wanted to touch on a few things at a high level from time to time. Like to pop in these, of course. Chief and I I get the stats every week, and so of course they're far. I can't think of anything more important that we review weekly than our crime stats. But what we have here today, of course, is our sort of annual version, which is very important and really captures a whole year. So I'm going to talk about a few things, but just before I forget, we have a new press secretary for the mayor's office, so you can all be nice to her. This is Shannon Kunkel. So she's on day 3. So anyway, but she's been around in communication stuff in New Mexico for a long time, so I think she'll be a joy to work with for all of you. Okay, so let's get back to crime stats. I think in general, here's what we want to really remind folks of. You know, for basically 10 years, every crime stat was going up. That's the story of our city. That's how things have been. And we all know we feel this in our daily lives, whether it's our own house trying to broken into, our own car stolen, right? Crime has affected almost every single person we know in this city. That is never lost on the chief or I or anyone in city government. We understand that crime is a huge challenge. We also understand that it has been building for 10 years. Now, something changed about, let's say, 18 months to 2 years ago. And what changed is all of a sudden about half the crime categories finally turned in the right direction. This is a drastic change over a decade-long trend. And so what we're sharing today is that this has continued. 2024 saw us build on the 6 months of 2023, where all of a sudden about half these key measures started going down. Now, they have a long way to go. That is not lost on anyone. When you're at an all-time high and crime's been going up for 10 years and it starts coming down, you got a long way to go. We understand that. But what we're seeing is real traction. That's the difference. We are seeing the initiatives and the investments that we're making finally take hold and show up in our crime stats. And that is a great thing for our city. Now, I want to just highlight auto theft for a minute. You know, it was basically going up every year and we were number 1 every year. And now we're number 7, right? This is basically a example of all of our crime in Albuquerque. We're still top 10. We're still tough. We have a long ways to go. It's still a huge problem. But we're 7th worst instead of 1st worst. That is sort of the story for most of our key crime stats. So what you're going to hear today is that especially aggravated assaults continue to go down, in this case by 11%. Now, most of those occur in the Southeast and in the International District. And so we're seeing a lot of our operations and our work up there show up in statistics like that. We also see that people injured by gunfire is down, and of course homicides down again slightly for the year. Now, these efforts on Central, we believe, are paying off, and I want to talk about just briefly what changed 2 years ago. I think that's the key question. And basically, the chief and the leadership team and us, we decided that we were going to have to fight crime differently and not just wait for a ton of new officers. Now, the good news is our officer numbers have continued to steadily rise. That has been very helpful. So that's true, but we're nowhere near that 1,200 number. And I've said this before, that basically 2 years ago, we said we got to fight crime differently. It can't just be by hiring more officers. So we did 2 things. We invested a lot in technology. And this was actually happening years before, but it all started to come online right around 2 years ago. And so this is why we now have thousands of cameras that APD uses all over the city. This is why we have now 20% of our city covered in gunshot detection. This is also why we have license plate readers tracking stolen cars. This is why we give automated speed enforcement tickets. And it's also why we have our community safety department. I'm going to explain those 2 last things, because the first step was technology. And our goal, and with the help of the legislature we might get there, is that we want this technology safety net over the whole city, not just 20%. But we've seen what happens when you have 20%. It means that when there's a shooting, we can find a casing Then we can also look on the cameras and find the vehicle. We get a make for the vehicle, and then we track the vehicle through the city, and then we read the license plate, and then we know who maybe owns it, or if it's stolen or where they're going, and then we catch that person. And that leads to our clearance rate. So our clearance rate continues to be 90% or higher, and that also changed. For almost a decade, it was around 50%. That basically meant that if you shot someone in this town within the course of a year, there was only a 50% chance we would catch you and put you in jail. That's not true anymore. Starting about 18 months ago, if you shoot someone in Albuquerque, we will catch you and we will put you in jail. And our stats verify that. So the second piece of the puzzle has been civilianization. And so that's the idea that if you can't get a bunch of new officers, what we'll do is we'll have civilians do a lot more work so that the officers can actually fight violent crime. And this is how we've been able to staff a lot of these efforts. That's why we have civilians taking traffic accidents. It's why we have our PSA number is triple what it was when we came in. And that's also why they do low-level 4 and 5 priority calls. It's so that it frees up officers to do other work. And then you see this strategy play out also with general response. The Community Safety Department has taken over 80,000 calls that APD didn't have to take. Again, freeing up those officers. Speed cameras are the same thing. So I think we have, I want to say 20 now, and we're adding 20 more this summer. Those cameras, right, have given 300,000 speeding tickets. But those are all speeding tickets and enforcement and symbols that we're taking back our city that sworn officers didn't have to do so they could go fight violent crime. So that has been our strategy, and I think we are at least seeing it is bending the curve in the right direction. That's why we're doubling down on these strategies, and that's why we've got to keep the push for all of these programs that are enabled by civilianization and technology. Okay, so with that, for the details and everything else, we're going to start with Gilbert and the Chief dueling pianos.
I want to thank everybody for being here today, and we're going to talk about, a lot of different crime categories and a lot of different trends that we're seeing. But we're not just looking at crime categories where we saw decreases and sometimes even an increase. I think, part of full transparency is admitting where there could be improvement. But we're also going to talk about some proactive measures, warrants, felony arrests, and other things that help us understand how we've gotten to where we got today. For example, felony arrest and new charges saw a 4% increase last year from the year before. Felony warrants, which is something we put a big emphasis on. 2 years ago, we saw, I think it was a 29% increase. And last year, we saw another 28% increase above that. And we were able to clear 6,200 felony warrants last year as opposed to the year before. Murder was down 3%. Aggravated assaults down 11%. Shooting with injuries down 14%. We struggled with burglaries. We saw them start to raise last year. Towards the end of the year, they were extremely high January, February, March, along with auto theft. But I attribute a lot of this to the delicacy of the system. We really had trouble booking juvenile offenders for any types of crime at that time because of the space issues that they were seeing at the juvenile facility. And as we increased our ability to book and hold juveniles accountable, we started to see, and it took us almost all year to climb out of it, but we ended up with a 2% decrease in auto theft. That's the 2% that are captured by NIBRs, and we know that NIBRs also includes stuff like e-bikes and scooters. One of the big numbers, which is the important number, which creates our national rankings, is like the NICB number, as we refer it to, the actual when there's not a car in the driveway the next day. And we know we had a larger decrease in that. And while most of the nation is still seeing increases in auto theft, we're seeing the decrease. And like Mayor stated, we're hoping that we will continue to go down from 7, hopefully 8, 9 this year. And we'll continue to see those reductions we're hoping. Robbery was down 8%, larceny down 4%. Crimes against person, non-negligent murder was down 3%. Assaults, unfortunately, were up 1%, and sex offenses were up 1%. We talked about burglary, up 11%, but motor vehicle theft down 2%, robbery down 8%, and larceny down 4%. Crimes against society, drug and narcotic offenses, which is very proactive measure of are we arresting more individuals, that was up 11%, and we saw a 22% decrease in weapon and law violations. So Gilbert has a PowerPoint presentation that we're going to be going through, and we're going to get specifics on each of these crimes, and we're just open to a little bit of a dialogue and a conversation about where we've made changes or what we've done to help combat some of these issues. So, Gilbert?
So this won't be a long PowerPoint. We just this will be on the website and just explain it a little bit for those of you who aren't used to the way these crime stats are reported. So these are the NIBRS, National Incident-Based Reporting System, that goes to the FBI. So it usually takes us a good 6 weeks to 8 weeks after the end of the year for all reports to come in and capture all the information. Even with that, things still change, and I'll give you an example. Homicides, we finished this year with 96 homicides. We just found out yesterday there was an incident last year that now is probably going to turn into a homicide because of the investigation determined that. So we'll get information about that out to you guys. But so these things still change even after the first of the year and even after a report to the FBI. Just want to point that out. And the aggravated assaults and shooting with injuries can be the same thing, but we calculate shooting with injuries kind of by hand. We like week by week and have meetings every single week on shootings with injuries as well as homicides. And since we've been doing those, this is the first time it's been down for an annual number, which is pretty significant. And that includes any kind of injury, including accidental shootings. Next slide. So Chief mentioned the number of arrests. So these are, this is an increase just in, these are new felony charges, up 4%. Next one. And these are felony warrant arrests, and that's up significantly, 28%. And for the past 2 years now, is it that we've been getting the funding from the legislature and the governor to do overtime and do warrant operations? This is the result. We're just seeing a lot more increases in arrests, and more likely than not, that's leading to the lowering of ag assaults and shootings. So on the NIBR report, this is just the overall. I know it's hard to tell just with these graphs, but it's last year, 2023 versus 2024. So crimes against property is down slightly. Crimes against person is up very slightly. Then crimes against society is down slightly. And that's, you can read statistics any way you want, but for a longer time, this was way higher. It was going up and up and up. A lot of that was because ShotSpotter, for example, we were adding ShotSpotter coverage. So we were capturing more incidents where officers were called out there, they pick up casings and that sort of thing. So it's a good thing, it's a proactive thing, but it was driving up the numbers. Now that we've had it a few years, it's kind of leveling off and just showing that difference between the year. And so this is crimes against property. We started to mention this on kind of auto theft and some other things. I probably could have done a longitudinal graph, but if you look at the 2023 number, these property crimes were going up, and then the start of last year, they were really up, and then we kind of took us all year to get back down. So as Chief said, we're in a pretty good place with a lot of those categories. Just cautionary tale on some of these, some of the crimes, and in the old days, the FBI stats would have, and they still have certain things like this where they show property crime and violent crime. These are kind of a mix between them. So for example, robberies are included in this category, which are probably more of a violent crime. But this is the way the FBI counts it. So this is that one. And then when you go on the website to look at this in more detail, these are just all the individual categories and subcategories. So, so crimes against property. So burglary, that's the one that we said went up. And I could get you last year's numbers if you need to compare them. But you'll see all the different, larceny is a big category because that's usually stealing items like at a store. The individual shoplifting actually was down a little bit. That's another one where we made some progress during the course of the year. But the overall larceny, which is 17,000 incidents, is down. So these are crimes against person. Like I mentioned, robbery should probably be in this category, and robberies where we've made significant progress in the last 4 or 5 years. So we would probably be lower if that was counted there. But as it is, we've pretty much been even through the years. This year, last year we went down. This year we're up by 1%. But as I said, ag assaults are down, which is a significant change. I think the lower assault categories also count here, which probably aren't violent in nature, so that's a little deceiving as well. And then these are just a breakdown of all the crimes against person categories. Ag assaults are the big one, homicide, kidnapping, and then a breakdown of the sex offenses. We do have, I think it's the next category, I'll point it out. So crimes against society, as Chief mentioned, it's the drug narcotics offenses where we're more proactive, and then the shot spotter and gun offenses account for a lot of these. We're down 4%. And then I do, just a caution, I think some of these stats got a little mixed up, so I need to go back and just double check them when we get out of here, but we'll post the new version on the website. And then I think weapon law violations are like the shot spotter primarily. And that's the end of the presentation.
You know,
Wrap it up.
You know, I think, you know, there's a lot of measures, like I said, that we don't have on here because we've kind of covered them during the course of the spring. We've talked about our traffic success, how we've seen an increase in traffic citations. We add in the traffic cameras, and our citations are through the roof as where they were several years ago. I think that we just got to keep in perspective that, you know, like Mayor said, we're not doing great, but we've put the brakes on the rises, and things are starting to slightly decrease, and we're hoping that we could continue this trend of slightly of continuing to decrease crime. Auto theft obviously is one of the big examples and one of the most successful categories that we've been in. But I don't want it to get lost that we are also doing such a much better job in investigations. Homicide investigations are the clear example of that. When I took over chief, somewhere around 50% clearance, and we're going on 3 years, we're right around that 90% rate. So we'll continue to work on our statistics, continue to map them. We do post them monthly online, year to date. They're not perfect. We know they can change, but we'll continue to monitor, ensure that we're doing everything that we can to reduce them. We'll talk a little bit about the methods we've used in the near future with the presentation on Duke City Stats specifically. We've really, over the last 6 months, seen a lot of improvement because of that program. And we're also, we also just want to point out that we will continue to update during the course of the year a little more frequently than we had in the past, just because we got to the point where we're able to post stats monthly in a preliminary form. So with that, questions? Yes, Matt.
Burglary went up 11%. It looks like it was hovering between 1,000 and 1,100 each quarter. Is there anything that you can point to as why burglaries went up, and is there a way you are addressing that you weren't before?
You know, burglary went up, and it's a really complicated tale. It starts with the beginning of the year with our inability to book juvenile offenders. We knew they were committing crime, we were arresting them for them, we weren't able to book them. Their crimes continued, and then we got that straightened out. And if you kind of look, as shopliftings went down, burglary started to ramp up. And I think that's one of those difficult things, is we got to remember that who are those offenders? Those offenders are generally individuals with substance abuse problems. We're not a perfect system to get these individuals help, and they still need to find ways to commit crimes to get their drugs. And we will continue to have this seesaw battle between crime categories. As we push on burglaries more, we'll see other categories start to rise. So it's not surprising that some of the categories that we saw reducing, that crime was displaced by burglary, and that burglaries became a much more utilized crime. But Gilbert will get the 10-year postings, and if you look at the 10-year crime trend we had, burglary was actually something that had been decreasing for a number of years. So we're still below where we were in 2017 when I came back to the department as a deputy chief.
How do you, I mean, shoplifting, obviously, you know where the stores are, you can go to the stores. How do you tackle burglary?
Duke City Stat has been essential in that, and we'll get into that in the near future. But what we do different than we've never done before is, in this room, once a week, all the commanders and investigative units come together, and they prioritize crimes that we know are being committed by possibly the same individuals, and we focus on those 5 people. And we're going to be able to show during this presentation on Duke City Stat how taking one individual, for example, in the foothills into custody, the impact they had on crimes the weeks that followed when that individual was taken into custody. So what we're trying to do is really take a data-driven approach to to getting our resources to the places that we need and impacting the biggest drivers of what's causing these numbers to go up.
You mentioned that in the beginning of the year you were unable to book juveniles. Can you remind me why that was? Was it a capacity issue?
It was a capacity issue, and I've talked about it in the past. I remember specifically December 28th, we worked over and over all day to try to get three juveniles that had been arrested for auto theft that were and they had a firearm with them. And it took us nonstop effort. The DA assisted us, everybody worked together, and that brought together everybody. And in January of last year, there started to be communications. And where we were last year, when it started, I think the maximum capacity at the juvenile facility was somewhere around 50. It may not be a perfect number there. And now the capacity is somewhere near 72. So it was our ability to help work with the system to get more individuals booked into custody of their juveniles.
And we saw that YSC, that facility, actually reached capacity last week on Thursday for males. Did you guys have any issues with booking juvenile offenders over the weekend or earlier this week, or?
It wasn't brought to my attention, and they do update me. They'll send a message that says the jail is at capacity. I'll be honest, I don't advise our officers, because if somebody needs to be arrested and booked, I want them to tell us no. And I want us to have a conversation, and if it's that important, it will shoot its way up the chain of command during that time, and we'll have discussions to find ways of how we could address this issue and not just not enforce the law at all. I think it's important that they at least get arrested, they get there, and then we at least have that conversation at that point.
I just wanted to point out real quick too, the mayor was talking about our technology, and then on this issue with the juveniles, we're working something right now where we hopefully we'll get someone in custody this afternoon who was involved in a shooting incident, and they're juveniles, I believe. So we'll see how it plays out, but it's a good example of where our investigators did a hell of a job. They used ShotSpotter in the mall areas, which we didn't have before until this year. So hopefully it's working out, but they've been really coming together on this investigation. It's not a huge homicide case or anything like that, but it is one of those where juveniles were involved with guns and could have killed somebody.
See, and like I said, I just really want to emphasize that point. When I'm notified there's a slowdown at the jail, we don't tell our officers. When they say there's at capacity at the D home, we don't tell our officers. We want to be told no at the last moment after we've taken them into custody, because that is part of accountability. And if the system gets away with us not putting pressure that there wasn't an ability to book somebody, it's like nothing happened, and they're not fully aware of how it just impacted us as a community.
And then what's that like if you can't book them? The officer just did all that work and they know that they...
Demoralizing for our officers. Trust me. I mean, we had a unique situation last year where we had an individual involved in a shooting, and I think everybody may remember the story. It was an 11-year-old. It was a battle over almost 17 hours of how the DA's office worked great in getting special court orders. I mean, we worked hard to make sure that those individuals got booked because we thought they had to, and all the parties actually came together quite well, and we were able to resolve it in a way where the individual was detained.
Chief, I know the mayor mentioned that the overall decline may be also attributed to extra efforts along Central and the International District. Do you attribute that decline as well to that?
Without a doubt. And we're seeing even more progress this year. Numbers are early, but we continue to see progress. And I think it was September of 2023 where we did a press conference in the International District right after balloons. And I gave a commitment that we were going to rotate operations between Warrants and Central Avenue. And we've continued that. And I'm happy to announce, I think the Sheriff's Department, State Police, the DA's office, they jumped on board and they started helping us a little bit more 2 weeks ago, and they're hitting East Central. That enabled us to move our people to West Central, and I think they told me last week, the first week of the operation on West Central, we had 62 arrests on West Central, and they still had like 50 arrests on East Central. So we know that the data is saying a lot of our crime occurs within a few blocks of Central, and getting resources out there. And we've also expanded the time of day. We have operations that we work at night. We've asked them, make sure that we're out there swing shift hours. So we're trying to expand the amount of time that we're spending out there, the amount of days a week, and we're pushing every effort because we know that's going to impact crime the most. Yes.
So what's the number one pain point
You know, I think one of the big pain points actually was our ability to have individuals detained. We know that. We've had that struggle. Everybody in the state legislature has had that discussion. We wanted to do our part to do what we can do best to impact it. And in 2018, I established the SHIELD unit, which basically helps prepare cases for the DA's office to ensure that they're prepared and that they're ready to go towards detention. So sometime in 2023, we actually moved our SHIELD unit out to the DA's office. There's increased communication with the DA's office, and we're building better cases to detain individuals. And we don't have those numbers with us, but we did stories last year about it, and the DA's office could confirm this. We've seen an increase in the amount of cases where detention was sought because there's better information at the onset, and then we've also seen increases in the amount of detention that was granted. So I think those are big successes of why we're seeing some of the changes we're seeing.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Hi. So I think the top line story here is that crime statistics are going down. Mayor Keller mentioned that there was an investment in technology and also ACS as well. But I want to ask you, what is the financial cost of these numbers going down? What does it cost the city to implement these things?
I could tell you, for example, like last year, I think we got somewhere near $8 million total from the state. Somewhere around $8 million total dumped into technology from the state for that. We know that the state also gave us an additional $3 million for a helicopter. City council gave us. The cost is in the millions. The cost every year is in the millions for us to continue to go forward. But I challenge this question. I don't think there's a citizen in Albuquerque that thinks a price is too high for safety. That is the number one thing that we hear from the community is they want a safe Albuquerque. They want us to be able to do our job. They want us to be able to go out there and take individuals and hold them accountable into custody. And like Gilbert talked about ShotSpotter, our expansions over the years, our success with license plate readers, our success with investigating digital technology. So there has been a huge investment into public safety over the past several years, and the mayor's absolutely correct. It helps, and it's part of the story that we're telling. Our officers, we talked about it last year, we talked about it at the end of 2023. Our officers now on their computer automatically get updated, like as they're driving down the street, a map will show where warrants are. That's a game changer for them to know where the last known address of somebody who has a warrant, and that's part of the success of us being able to increase felony warrant arrests.
And my other question is, we see numbers in terms of, abductions, sex offenses, that kind of thing. But can you speak anecdotally about demographics of people who are being impacted? Are you seeing more women, more children, more elders? What are you seeing in general?
You know, in general, I'll tell you this much, that a lot of our crime is kind of consistent with the population of Albuquerque. We impact crime. For example, the greatest number of homicide victims are from the Spanish community. But it also reflects in the number of offenders. So I think our crime in a lot of ways is a reflection of the community and the demographics of the community. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Chief, I wanted to ask you a question about the DWI investigation.
Always ready to answer
I
that.
know. How does it feel now knowing that at least 2 of your former officers are admitted criminals?
Oh, it's devastating. I'm telling you, it is just, and I've told the Josh Montano story. It came out with 13 yesterday. Like, for me, it is just, I knew some of these individuals. I met them over the years. I remember Josh as a PSA. He bought liquor for me for underage drinking stings when I was in charge of party patrol. And I remember when he got in his crash and they told me that he was ready to have guests at the hospital. And I remember I went down there and I got some money before I left the house, and I told my wife, and she's like, yeah, help them out. And I got there, and I remember when I was leaving, I gave his wife $200. And there's just like this sense of like disappointment, but at the same time betrayal. It is very disheartening that, like, I can't comprehend it. Like, I learned about how it was so much about a friendship with Mendez and Clear, and like, we're on different teams. Like, we're team prosecution, they're team defense. Like, how did those lines get blurred? But, as stuff comes out, I'm hoping that other people I have great faith in are implicated in this, and I hope that everybody who, I truly hope that I will leave no stone unturned, and everybody who is involved, I hope we find them, we hold them accountable. We're gonna continue to be as proactive as ever and go after, and I wanna thank the team, Kyle's heading it up, that, you know, we've uncovered a lot. You know, I really am proud of where they've taken us as a department, and I think we're leaps and bounds in front of other places that are just getting notification and starting their investigations. We're well into this, but it is just, it's heartbreaking to know that it got to this point for some of those individuals.
And since 1995 too, are you expecting way more people than you even thought?
Oh, tip of the iceberg, I said the other day, like, I've looked back to 2002, 2003, and I know the numbers we have. To go back and, there's like, if you go back from 8 to where we know we're solidly looking at people 10, that's another 15 years. Like, there without a doubt is gonna be more individuals involved, retired individuals involved. So, yes, there's more work to be done because of the information that's coming to light now through these plea agreements. Any other questions?
I actually want to follow up to that as well. We've been hearing a lot that a lot of these plea agreements are coming so that they can reach higher level officers, supervisory officers. Do you suspect anyone currently working now could be mentioned?
Is there some people that could possibly be? I think there's a couple people we're still looking at that we can't go either way. I just literally had this conversation with Commander Hartsock a couple hours ago, and he's like, man, at first I thought they were, and now he goes, I'm not feeling that they may be involved. We just don't know. But the investigation will get us there. And as the FBI uncovers things, it will get us more information. The first thing I did yesterday evening was I read the plea agreement from the deputy. And I looked to see what I could see. And there were some really interesting things in there, like how did they coordinate certain things. So we look at those plea agreements and we see anything we could use, and we'll launch new investigations. They've notified us 2 people were had joined the Giglio list. One resigned, one's on admin leave, and we were able to launch an investigation based off that, and hopefully we'll have resolution to that in the next month.
Do you expect any